Over the weekend, we received numerous confirmed reports of federal agents from ICE and Customs, Border Patrol, abusing their power, intimidating innocent civilians, and waging war on our people. All of this has been aimed at causing chaos and mayhem in the hopes of creating a pretext to deploy military troops against Chicago and Broadview and other suburbs, just as the president is doing right now in Oregon. Moments ago, the Illinois National Guard received word that the Department of Homeland Security has sent a memo to the Department of War seeking the deployment of 100 military troops to Illinois, claiming a need for the protection of ICE personnel and facilities. What I have been warning of is now being realized. One thing is clear, none of what Trump is doing is making Illinois safer. 2 weeks ago, a man was shot and killed by ICE in Franklin Park, Illinois. Shortly after, ICE issued a statement justifying the killing, saying the federal agent was seriously injured. The Chicago Sun-Times has brought to light that the injuries were, in the agent's own words, nothing major. A man is dead. A community is shaken up. And we are yet again left with more questions than answers. On Saturday, federal agents wreaked havoc on the village of Broadview, a small suburb west of Chicago with 8,000 residents. I want to recognize Broadview Mayor Katrina Thompson, who is here today, and thank her for her strong and vocal leadership on behalf of her community. I also want to thank Broadview's police chief, Thomas Mills, for his steady leadership and partnership with state and surrounding local law enforcement. In Broadview, people nonviolently holding signs and chanting against brutality, expressing their First Amendment rights, have been regularly attacked with chemical agents like tear gas, pepper spray, rubber bullets, and flashbangs. Agents reportedly unholstered their guns and pointed them at protesters. In their own words, ICE intended to unleash, quote, a shit show in the Broadview community. Without provocation and acting like jackbooted thugs, ICE has attacked and detained members of the press, including an independent journalist. A CBS Chicago correspondent had chemical munitions fired at her car where there were no protesters in sight. And we have received many reports of U.S. citizens being detained for simply stepping onto the public street. That brings us to yesterday. On a beautiful weekend when families were out enjoying their day in Chicago, armed Border Patrol agents were downtown marching up and down Michigan Avenue, harassing and intimidating residents and tourists. In Millennium Park, federal agents interrogated a family as their small daughter held onto her doll and appeared to try to translate for her parents. Officers carried large, unholstered, offensive weapons downtown, dressed in camouflage and masks. Building tradesmen near Tribune Tower, simply doing their jobs, were detained by federal agents while working on a construction site. Separately, 24 federal agents chased down a man, handcuffed him, and asked him for his papers. Meanwhile, ICE's chief offender, Gregory Bovino, has been leading the disruption and causing mayhem while he gleefully poses for photo ops and TikTok videos. Bovino even admitted on the record that they are making arrests based on how you look. Based on how you look. How you look. That's the baseline. They're not targeting violent criminals or gang members. They're arresting tamale vendors and delivery men and shaking down families. Donald Trump and Kristi Noem and Tom Homan said they were targeting the worst of the worst criminals. They lied, and they continue to lie. 60% of the individuals that ICE has taken in Illinois this year have no criminal convictions of any kind. ICE is running around the loop harassing people for not being white. Just a year ago, that was illegal in the United States. Now, ICE is making it commonplace. That's not making America great. In any other country, if federal agents fired upon journalists and protesters when unprovoked, what would we call it? If federal agents marched down busy streets, harassing civilians and demanding their papers, what would we say? I don't think we'd have any trouble calling it what it is: authoritarianism. So let's not pretend it's something else when it happens in our American cities. The MAGA Republican-supported invasion of Portland and Chicago and LA and Washington, D.C. is not making us any safer. Instead, it is putting our people in danger. This is an attack on neighborhoods, on lawful residents, on U.S. citizens. That's not preventing crime, as Donald Trump claims. That's threatening public safety. But as I've said many times, for Donald Trump and the MAGAs in Congress, this is not about fighting crime or about public safety. This is about sowing fear and intimidation and division among Americans. It was about creating a pretext to send armed military troops into our communities. This is about consolidating power in Donald Trump's hands. What he plans to do with that power, now or during the 2026 elections, should worry all of us. When you add to that the Trump administration's effort to label as dangerous free speech critical of him, White House senior staff calling the Democratic Party fascist, the Trump-appointed FCC chair threatening to revoke broadcast licenses and the approval of a merger in order to silence late-night comedians, Trump's threats to jail political opponents. You cannot call this anything except an attack on the Constitution of the United States. But let's also talk about what he's doing to the economy with all these attacks on our communities. Our small businesses suffer when our residents and visitors who are shopping and eating are made to feel unsafe by the jackbooted thugs roaming around a peaceful downtown. Parents are now scared to send their kids to school for fear the troops will grab their children. Students are afraid they'll come home and find their parents have been disappeared by ICE. This is no way to live. We are here together today, elected officials, business leaders, the faith community, law enforcement, educators, community organizations, united in our opposition to these flagrant abuses of power by the federal government. With one voice, we are telling this unwarranted and unconstitutional occupation by ICE and potentially by military troops to get out of Chicago. You are not helping us. Over the past month, I've been all across the city and all across the region, from Bronzeville to Austin to Pilsen to Little Village, talking to residents and to local business owners. Not one of them has asked for armed military troops in our streets. They have all said loudly that there is no emergency here on the ground that requires the deployment of military troops or the use of military tactics. I refuse to stay silent about this and let the slow encroachment of our freedoms and liberties continue unabated. The state of Illinois and all of us will continue to fight this with everything that we have. So, people of Illinois, we need your help. Get out your cell phones, record and narrate what you see. Put it on social media. Peacefully ask for badge numbers and identification. Speak up for your neighbors. We need to let the world know that this is happening and that we won't stand for it. I was surprised and pleased to see that a federal agent in New York was put on leave after he was caught throwing a woman to the ground. Good. Good. That would never have happened, though, if it wasn't on camera. So keep documenting. It could make a world of difference for someone, perhaps for all of us. I look forward to taking your questions, and right now I'd like to hand the microphone over to Mayor Brandon Johnson. Mayor.
Thank you, Governor. Of course. Thank you, Governor, and good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I'm grateful to all of the elected leaders here, the community, business, and faith leaders that are joining us today. Many Chicagoans were shocked and appalled to see videos of heavily armed, masked federal agents in our streets yesterday. The reality is that this stunt has nothing to do with public safety. This is about politics, money, and power. The president is using his militarized force the exact way he intended to advance his political goals. He wants to militarize our cities, whether that's through ICE or through the National Guard or the United States Army or armed forces. He wants to provoke conflict so that he can use this as a pretext to send even more federal agents into our city. What we saw yesterday was an absolute disgrace. Families, visitors, everyday Chicagoans were out enjoying our city, and they were met with dozens of heavily armed federal agents aiming to strike fear in our communities. They targeted street vendors and construction workers, just trying to make an honest living. They made a little girl act as a translator as they took her family into custody. These are heartbreaking scenes that have nothing to do with making our city safer. My question to these masked, heavily armed individuals is simple. What could you possibly need an automatic weapon for? The only plausible explanation is that their aim is not to carry out their duties, but instead strike fear in our communities. If you are following the law, if you are in accordance with the Constitution, if you have a criminal warrant, then there is no reason to cover your face. This comes on the heels of the revelation that was reported on MSNBC that Tom Homan, the so-called border czar, accepted a $50,000 bribe from undercover FBI agents in exchange for lucrative detention center contracts. So let's call it what it is. Tom Homan sold out the American people for $50,000 in cash. And that's why I'm calling on the federal government to appoint an independent investigator to review every single contract in the city of Chicago, the county and the state, related to any ICE detention centers. The people have a right to know if these contracts are legitimate or if they were granted as a result of outright bribery and corruption. As of last week, 72% of those held in ICE detention have no criminal record. And of those with a criminal record, many are for traffic violations and misdemeanors. The Trump administration's detention campaign is not for public safety, it is for profit. More than 90% of the immigration detention centers are run by private and for-profit corporations. The Trump administration has already engaged in no-bid contracts with private prison contractors across the United States. Executives at private prison firms are calling this a gold rush, as their stocks have soared by as much as 80%. In May, the CEO of a private prison corporation told investors, and this is a quote, "Truly one of the most exciting periods in the history of the company." One company estimated that they could make as much as $400 million of taxpayer money per year from private detention. Another said that it could make as much as $1 billion in additional revenue. The two largest private prison corporations gave President Donald Trump at least $2.8 million for his re-election campaign. And this is the agency that Trump and Republicans just handed $170 billion, a blank check with little to no oversight. The money that Republicans gave to ICE is more, there's more funding given to ICE in this last budget that has been allocated for police departments at state and local governments in all 50 states, including the District of Columbia combined. Let me say that again. Trump gave his personal militarized force more money than all other local and state police funding combined. And the guy they put in charge of that funding was bought for $50,000 in cash. They are lining their own pockets and the pockets of the executives of small number corporations, to a small number of corporations. I've spoken with parents in Pilsen, Little Village, spoken to business owners on Devon Street, elders in Uptown who are too scared to take their children to school. We're losing business, and they're too afraid to even attend church because of their legal status. They're afraid of the reckless actions that they have seen. This is not being tough or patriotic. To throw a crying mother to the floor who just wanted to be reunited with her children, it's abominable. It's not law and order to body slam a 79-year-old business owner, an American citizen, for trying to produce the papers of his employees. And there's nothing brave about firing pepper bullets with chemical agents at a Chicago CBS reporter for simply showing up to do her job. Greg Bovino, who spends countless taxpayer dollars on TikTok videos of himself, was in charge of the operation in Los Angeles, where a 15-year-old kid, an American citizen with disabilities, was handcuffed and held at gunpoint by ICE. His family is now suing. By the time this is over, there will be hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer dollars wasted in settlements related to the excessive use of force and the unconstitutional actions of this administration. So again, let's make this very clear. This is not about public safety. This is not even about immigration. This is the continuation of the Trump administration's war on the poor. They have cut food assistance, they have cut Medicaid, they have cut violence prevention funding. They have made life harder and more dangerous for poor and working people across this country. They have declared war on poor on behalf of the ultra-rich, and so they can simply funnel our tax dollars to a small handful of billionaires. So we have to make sure that we continue to show our support for the people of this city and for this country. In closing, at a time when we are cutting hundreds of millions of dollars from healthcare, public health, housing, and defunding public education, manufacturing austerity, I'll say that plainly, the Trump administration is worsening poverty at the same time as declaring war on the poor. This is an untrustworthy, corrupt, and out-of-control administration that is doing everything in their power to foment chaos in our cities. Whether it's in Portland, Los Angeles, or Chicago, we cannot accept the militarization of our cities. We will continue to stand united as a city, as a county, as a state, and local villages to reject any attempts to militarize our cities. I want to be very clear, what we saw this Sunday is not unique. As the governor has indicated, this is happening in villages like Broadview and other places across this country. And so we have to make sure that this is not the last time we express our unified voice to ensure that we protect the interests of all people. And with that, I will turn it over to our Attorney General, Kwame Raoul.
Thank you, Mayor. Governor, thanks for convening us. From masked federal agents using tear gas against people exercising their First Amendment rights in Broadview to mask uniformed federal agents carrying automatic rifles as they menace people in downtown Chicago. Which is well patrolled by both the Chicago Police Department and the Cook County Sheriff's Office. The images we have seen in Chicago area look more like a region under siege than they do America in peacetime. If it was not clear from before, it should be plain now. The president's goal is to sow chaos, instill fear, and Chicagoans and the American people at large. It's also clear that this has never been about fighting crime. Let me state clearly, I am not averse to the President of the United States wanting to be helpful in fighting crime in American cities. I'm not averse to federal law enforcement agencies contributing to fighting crime in American cities. In fact, we have had a great history of collaboration with those federal law enforcement agencies that are trained to fight crimes on the local level. However, if the president were sincere about fighting crime, he would devote more resources to those federal law enforcement agencies with whom we have partnered with, which we have had a great working relationship with, instead of either cutting their budgets or reassigning their agents to doing immigration work instead of crime-fighting work. He would not be cutting funding from community violence interruption. He would not be depriving victims of crime of the resources they need based on unrelated immigration criteria. Instead, he's federalizing the state of Oregon's National Guard. And as the governor laid out, he's following the same pattern that he followed in Oregon, and we just received a memo, same steps that were followed in Oregon. The mobilization of the military isn't just an ineffective strategy to address crime, it is illegal. That is why I stand in solidarity with my colleague, Oregon Attorney General Dan Rayfield. We've been in contact over the weekend as well as earlier this morning, who filed a lawsuit yesterday against the Trump administration's mobilization of the National Guard there. The 10th Amendment preserves states' sovereignty to enforce state laws as they see fit. The Posse Comitatus Act, as I've stated before, limits the federal government's ability to use the military for domestic law enforcement. A judge in California recognized that fact earlier this month. And the militia clauses of the United States Constitution give Congress sole authority to decide what factual circumstances allow the president to federalize the National Guard. They don't exist here. The president has failed to establish that any of the legal prerequisites exist for his efforts to federalize the Guard. Which is why litigation challenging these efforts is now pending in multiple courts. And if the evidence follows, if the pattern follows what we've seen in Oregon, he should expect a legal challenge here as well. As a matter of fact, this afternoon, we're filing a lawsuit challenging the administration's unlawful reallocation of more than $100 million in public safety and disaster relief funds away from Illinois and other states around the country. These funds, under the Homeland Security Grant Program, help states protect against acts of terrorism and are a critical source of money for networks of police departments, fire departments, emergency services, and public works departments across the country. In this latest action by the administration, the cut to Illinois funds alone is over $30 million. None of this chaos and none of these acts make us safer. To be clear, our U.S. Constitution is still the law of the land. It is generally unlawful for people to be subject to detention or search without probable cause or reasonable suspicion to believe that a crime has been committed. Due process is still required when someone is deprived of their liberty. The First Amendment still protects the right to free speech and peaceably and lawfully assemble. which includes the right to express one's views, even if those views are critical of government policies and how they're being carried out. That said, it is important to note that protesters must also comply with applicable laws. For example, the First Amendment does not allow for protesters to assault, intimidate, interfere with an officer of the United States government or local government while they are engaged in their performance, or to obstruct or impede federal civil immigration vehicles or enforcement operation. Clearly, this deployment of the federal officers into our well-policed central business district is meant to provoke Chicagoans. What the president is hoping to do is foment chaos by inciting out-of-control protests. So I urge Illinoisans, don't take the bait. There is no emergency in Chicago. Don't help him create one. Exercise your First Amendment rights, but do so peacefully, without violence or destruction of property. If you see what you believe to be civil rights being violated, use your phone or camera to document it, to bear witness. My office is monitoring these images, and so are legal and civil rights organizations around the city, the state, and the nation. I'm here to say that no president can flout the Constitution. The rule of law matters in the state of Illinois, and we will not hesitate to preserve it. At this time, I'd like to pass the mic to County Board President Tony Pretman.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I want to thank you all for being here today and for showing your support. My county, Cook County, is home to more than 5 million people, many of whom are immigrants who came here seeking a better life for themselves and their families. Yet today, many of our friends, families, and neighbors no longer feel safe at home, at work, or in public spaces. Federal decisions to militarize ICE activity have set a dangerous precedent. ICE agents are wearing masks, breaking into homes, and carrying weapons in downtown areas. These actions have created fear and chaos across our region and are designed to intimidate our residents. ICE agents have fired tear gas, pepper spray, and rubber bullets at protesters and journalists in Broadview. In Chicago, agents in tactical gear are carrying long guns on our streets. None of this creates safety or security. It only spreads fear. On behalf of Cook County, I stand here today to call for an end to these shameless, appalling tactics. And I want to make clear, as a welcoming county, we will continue to work every day to ensure that every resident feels safe, respected, and valued. Our residents do not want to see masked individuals storming into neighborhoods, terrorizing families, and kidnapping people off our streets. They do not want to see an undocumented father with no criminal record fatally shot in their community. These extreme, un-American, and discriminatory actions by federal agents, ordered by national leaders, are cruel and unacceptable. Instead of leadership that unites us and invests in people, we see the emboldening of unchecked power. It's clear that federal leaders have no respect for our laws, our values, and are working to undermine the very fabric of our society. The lack of human decency shown toward immigrant families, families who contribute greatly to our culture, our economy, and our communities, is indefensible. And it doesn't stop there. We've seen similar attacks on citizens as well. Plainclothes agents, unmarked cars, and the refusal to provide identification are not signs of transparency or accountability. They're acts of cowardice. Cook County will not tolerate injustice or the inhumane treatment of people who came here seeking safety and the chance to build a better life. That's why I, along with the state and local leaders standing here today, called for accountability and justice. We must ensure that federal agencies act lawfully and respect the rights of all of our people. And now I'd like to bring to the podium Senator Villa.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I am Karina Villa. I am the state senator of the 25th Senate District. I serve as the Senate chair of the Illinois Legislative Latino Caucus, which is made up of 17 legislators from across the state. We are here to say Illinoisans will stand together and our state will not be intimidated. Donald Trump has militarized agents. He has sent them to our suburbs like my hometown of West Chicago, to Broadview, and now to our peaceful streets of downtown Chicago. These masked agents are marching through our neighborhoods, masked in technical gear and intimidating families and neighbors who are an essential part of our lives. Let's remember what you have seen. Parents attacked on their way to work, students facing ICE agents on the way to schools, protesters are shot with chemical munitions, the press being arrested. What we are seeing is the First Amendment rights, our First Amendment rights, being eroded by an authoritarian administration determined to dismantle dissent. This is not safety. This is persecution. The Illinois Legislative Latino Caucus stands united with Governor Pritzker and leaders at every level, demanding answers about the stolen life of Silverio Villegas Gonzalez and so-called Operation Midway Blitz. We demand that every Illinoisan receive the right to due process, medical care, and access to legal counsel. We are delivering on these fundamental rights with the Trust Act and my Safe Schools bill, and we will continue to legislate to make sure that Illinois remains the safest and most welcoming state in our country. Let us be absolutely clear. No president, no agent, no badge is above the Constitution. The powerful display of solidarity from our neighbors and allies on the ground has been a fierce display of resistance and courage. It has shown the true strength of our state. We will not cower. We will not cooperate with cruelty. We will continue to lend our voices to those that the Trump administration is trying to silence. We will continue to record and report ICE activity in our communities, and we will continue to stand up for every vulnerable person in our state. To every immigrant watching, you are not invisible, and you are not alone. We see you, we value you, and we will defend you. These are our cities, and this is our state. We will not back down. Ahora en español. Buenas tardes. Soy Karina Villa, senadora estatal del Distrito 25 y líder del Caucus Legislativo Latino en Illinois. Somos compuestos de 17 legisladores en todo el estado. Estamos aquí para decirle a los residentes de Illinois que estamos unidos y esto es nuestro estado y no nos vamos a dejar intimidar. Donald Trump ha mandado agentes militarizados a nuestros suburbios, como mi ciudad de West Chicago, a Broadview y ahora dentro de las calles de Chicago. Estos agentes enmascarados y armados caminan por nuestros vecindarios con equipo táctico, intimidando a las familias y vecinos que son una parte esencial de nuestra comunidad y de nuestras vidas. Recuerden lo que han visto. Padres atacados caminando al trabajo, estudiantes enfrentándose a agentes de ICE cuando van a la escuela, manifestantes gaseados y disparados con municiones químicas, periodistas arrestados y nuestros derechos constitucionales debilitados por un gobierno federal autoritario decidido a silenciar a quienes piensan diferente. Esto no es seguridad, esto es persecución. El Caucus Legislativo Latino de Illinois se mantiene unido con el gobernador Pritzker y con líderes a través del estado de Illinois a todos niveles para exigir respuestas sobre la vida robada de Silverio Villegas González y sobre la llamada Operación Midway Blitz. Exigimos que toda persona en Illinois tenga derecho al debido proceso, atención médica y acceso a representación legal. Estamos cumpliendo con estos derechos fundamentales a través de la ley Trust y mi proyecto de ley Las Escuelas Seguras. Seguiremos legislando para que Illinois sea el estado más seguro y acogedor en el país para inmigrantes. Que quede absolutamente claro. Ningún presidente, ningún agente, ninguna insignia está por encima de la Constitución. La poderosa muestra de solidaridad de nuestras comunidades y aliados ha sido una valiente expresión de resistencia y coraje. Ha demostrado la verdadera fuerza de nuestro Estado. No nos vamos a acobardar, no nos vamos a colaborar con la crueldad. Seguiremos alzando nuestras voces por quienes la administración de Trump intentan silenciar. Seguiremos documentando y reportando la actividad de ICE en nuestras comunidades. Y seguiremos defendiendo a cada persona vulnerable en nuestro estado, a cada inmigrante que nos está viendo. No eres invisible, no estás solo. Te vemos, te valoramos y te vamos a defender. Estas son nuestras ciudades. Este es nuestro estado. No nos vamos a rendir. Y ahora le paso el micrófono a Ere Rendón. Gracias.
Buenas tardes. My name is Erendira Rendon. I'm Vice President of Immigrant Justice at the Resurrection Project. For 29 days, the immigrant community, particularly the Latino community, has been under attack. This weekend marked another dangerous escalation in the assault that is happening in our communities. DHS has admitted to members of the press that they are making enforcement decisions based on racial profiling, based on class, based on how we dress, and based on the language we speak. If you look like me, you are in danger. On Sunday, in back of the yards, ICE officers violently arrested 3 U.S. citizens on baseless charges simply for exercising their constitutional right to free speech. DHS terrorizes and showcases our pain on social media. These high-visibility enforcement actions are designed to feed a media narrative that says that immigrants are the threat. But we know the truth. Immigrants power our economy. Immigrants keep prices down. Immigrants feed us. Immigrants build your homes. Immigrants, we love our families. Whew.
Sorry. Take your time.
An attack on us is an attack on all of America.
That's right.
This weekend's attack on workers and on families. Children were arrested this weekend. It's just the pattern of escalation that we've been seeing in our communities. It's just that it happened downtown. Right now in Broadview, there are 200 people in a place that is not a detention center. They are being held in inhumane conditions. There are no beds. There are no showers. There is limited food. They order children's meals from Subway to eat. We are not allowed to speak to any of our clients that are held in that facility. It is a black hole, and people go missing for days. People are being forced to sign their voluntary departure forms, and their families are being denied access to them. DHS agencies continue to act with no respect for the law, defying court orders and attacking our community members, our faith institutions, and everybody who is protesting. There are over 60 organizations actively working to defend our communities. The Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, leading all rapid response in the hotline. The rapid response folks are our heroes. The National Immigrant Justice Center, who last week filed a lawsuit to uphold the Constitution, and dozens more. Since September 1st at the Resurrection Project, we have received over 320 requests for legal assistance. These are undocumented residents, green card holders, and 2 dreamers with DACA. And now even citizens are being arrested. This should concern every single person. I am grateful to Senator Pritzker and to all of our elected leaders who have made Illinois a safer place for us to live, even though right now we are under attack. And our message to all immigrant community continues to be the same. Primero, les quiero asegurar que también nosotros somos inmigrantes. También nosotros nos preocupamos por nuestras familias. Visit illinoisimmigrationinfo.org for up-to-date information if you have, and you can also call the hotline, the ICE Family Support Hotline at 1-855-HELP-MY-FAMILY if you see ICE. Buenas tardes, me llamo Heréndira Rendón, soy vicepresidenta de Justicia para el Inmigrante en Proyecto Resurrección. Durante 29 días, la comunidad inmigrante y muy en particular la comunidad latina ha estado bajo ataque. Este fin de semana marcó otro incremento en el asalto a nuestras comunidades. DHS, el Departamento de Homeland Security, ha admitido que lo único que necesitan para parar a una persona es basado en cómo se ven, basado en cómo se visten, basado en los carros que manejamos y en el idioma que hablamos. El domingo, en el barrio de las Empacadoras, agentes de ICE arrestaron a 3 ciudadanos americanos simplemente por protegernos y ejercer su derecho de libertad de expresión. DHS está aterrorizando a nuestras comunidades y al mismo tiempo está documentando nuestro dolor y poniéndolo en las presas en las medias sociales. Estas acciones son un ataque a los inmigrantes, son un ataque a la comunidad latina. Lo que están tratando de hacer es crear una narrativa que los inmigrantes son peligrosos. Pero nosotros sabemos quiénes somos. Los inmigrantes damos de comer. Los inmigrantes
You got it.
That's all right. Take your time.
Los inmigrantes construimos sus casas. Los inmigrantes limpiamos sus casas. Y a pesar de estos momentos que estamos pasando, tenemos que seguir recordando y ejerciendo nuestros derechos. Hay más de 60 organizaciones que están trabajando lo más que se pueda para poder protegernos. La Coalición Pro Derechos de Inmigrantes y Refugiados de Illinois está liderando toda la respuesta rápida con los héroes que están saliendo y tratando de sacar a ICE de nuestras comunidades. El National Immigrant Justice Center metió una demanda la semana pasada para poder defender nuestros derechos. En Proyecto Resurrección hemos recibido más de 320 solicitudes para defensa legal. Estoy agradecida con el gobernador Pritzker y con tus líderes y nuestros líderes elegidos de Illinois que están haciendo todo lo posible por defendernos en contra de este ataque que estamos viviendo. Nuestro mensaje sigue el mismo. Si ves a ICE, llama a la ayuda de ICER y también puedes visitar a la página illinoisimmigrationinfo.org para más información. Muchísimas gracias. Y voy a terminar con los nombres de algunas personas que esta semana fueron detenidas. Este mensaje es para Santiago, Manuel, Mara, José, Judith, Yuridia, Marcos, Juan. Estamos con ustedes. Gracias. Now I'd like to welcome Jack Lavin.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Jack Lavin, President and CEO of the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce, which represents business of all sizes and sectors across Chicago. First, I want to thank Governor Pritzker for your leadership in bringing this united front of government, business, labor, civic, faith, and community leaders together today. I've long spoke to our shared goal of improving public safety and reducing violence and the importance of true collaboration in that effort. Chicago has made real progress thanks to the leadership of Governor Pritzker, Mayor Johnson, President Preckwinkle, and the collaboration of business leaders, local law enforcement, violence prevention organizations, and our community and faith leaders. That progress is important, not just for families and neighborhoods, but for businesses, jobs, economic growth in every corner of our city. We've been investing in real collaborative solutions, investments by the state and the city in jobs for youth and community violence intervention programs, working closely with the Chicago Police Department, the Cook County State's Attorney, Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul, and Senate President Harmon, supporting programs like CRED, who are working every day to reduce violence and expand opportunity, and partnering with a coalition of business groups on initiatives to create jobs and programs for youth and community violence intervention programs. We have a lot more work to do, but these collaborations are making a real difference, and they reflect what actually works: constructive partnerships. That is why the sudden deployment of federal Border Patrol agents to Chicago's downtown yesterday is such a concern. We've seen in other cities how the presence of federal agents can needlessly disrupt communities, create uncertainty, and hurt economies. They scare people away from restaurants, cultural events, and our downtown, the heart of Chicago's economic engine. They deter tourists from visiting our city and employees from going to work. The needless uncertainty and unpredictability they bring discourages consumer activity, especially hurting small businesses that depend on steady foot traffic. Businesses in Chicago are already dealing with so much pressure and economic uncertainty between inflation, tariffs, fiscal issues, and other rising costs. The last thing they need is another element of uncertainty to add to their challenges. Let me be clear. Everyone shares the same goal: safer streets, stronger neighborhoods, and a thriving economy. The business community is open to partnership with the federal government, as we have always been. But partnership means working together, planning together, listening to community voices, and supporting the efforts that are already moving us in the right direction. Yesterday's actions were not any of these things, and further escalation like this would be unnecessary. Chicago is a world-class city. I'm going to say that again. Chicago is a world-class city, and any other narrative is false. We are a city of incredible beauty and unmatched strengths, a workforce and talent that are second to none, amazing transportation infrastructure, airports, and educational institutions, and an affordable and great quality of life with our restaurants and cultural institutions. We are on the path to growth and safety through collaboration. Yesterday's actions undermine that progress, create a false narrative, and undercut our shared goals. It risks slowing the very economic activity we need to keep this city moving forward. The best path forward is clear: constructive partnerships and collaboration, not distraction and disruption. We welcome federal engagement, but only if it builds on the trust and collaboration already underway. That is how we will continue to make Chicago safer, stronger, and more prosperous for everyone, and how we will build on the world-class city that we already are. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce Reverend Sierra Bates Chamberlain.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Reverend Sierra Bates Chamberlain with Live Free, Illinois, where we organize with faith communities across the state. The federal government has persistently poured billions into harming and victimizing U.S. citizens and undocumented survivors alike. Let's be clear. In this country, we have constitutionally protected freedom of speech. To target, track, and criminalize protesters, people exercising their right to speak out against injustice, is nothing less than an attempt to drag this nation toward an authoritarian rule. And hear me when I say, we will not allow it. This is not about safety. This is not about immigration. This is about wolves in sheep's clothing, quoting scripture while pushing a dangerous Christian authoritarian agenda. Very similar to another Christian nationalist leader named Vladimir Putin. This agenda is nothing more than a strategy designed to divide, dominate, and destroy. Every Illinoisan, every American must see the truth. This is not a migrant issue. This is a battle for the very soul of our country. So let us rise, let us resist. The weapons of our warfare are not of human origin. They are mighty through God to pull down strongholds. Let us protect one another and defeat hate with unshakable love. Because as Pastor Michael McBride would say, a disorganized truth cannot defeat an organized lie. So let's organize, let's unify, let's mobilize, and together we will beat back evil, defend our democracy, and claim the future that our children deserve. Thank you, and with that being said, I will return it back to Governor Pritzker.
Thank you, Reverend. Happy to take any questions from members of the media. Tina.
What do you see as military troops? Is that specifically National Guard? Is it something else? And then are you seeing any lessons learned from Portland?
So it's unclear what troops are being requested or potentially could be sent by the Department of War. So that's the answer to the first question. I think, as you've heard, I mean, these are unnecessary. It's a provocation, and it's my, solemn hope anyway that even now that we might be able to deter the federal government from carrying out what seems to be in progress. I spoke yesterday with the governor of Oregon. I also spoke with her the day before. We shared what was happening on the ground here, what's happening on the ground in Oregon. This is what happened yesterday afternoon. That is, they received word that a memo had been sent to the Department of War by the Department of Homeland Security, and we see things moving in that direction in Oregon. Unclear yet what the next steps might be with regard to the city of Chicago. Let me be clear. They're not communicating with the city of Chicago, with the state of Illinois, with Cook County, with Broadview, with anybody. They are going at this because, I don't know, Greg Bovino is putting up his TikTok videos, and it's giving a misimpression of what's happening on the ground. We have peaceful protesters, as they have all across the country, by the way. People are peacefully protesting. And we have, in response to that, chemical agents being fired at people. Indeed, people who are doing nothing more than sitting in their cars. Reporters being detained. So the provocation is coming from ICE, and with clear intent to have the federal government send military troops.
Governor?
Yes, Chris.
Governor, this is for you and/or the mayor of Broadview, Mayor Thompson, if she'd like to take it. But I just want to get a sense so that viewers and listeners right now understand, when journalists like my colleague in the CBS Chicago newsroom was targeted yesterday, or struck yesterday, what message do you read into that? And what specifically is being done to protect journalists and protesters in Broadview now that we've reached this flashpoint?
Well, I think that it's clear that there are no rules for ICE, that they literally just believe they have the run of the place, that they can take out their aggression on the people of Broadview, on the people of the city of Chicago, that the federal government and the President of the United States have just given them carte blanche to do whatever it is that they want. Let me be clear. There have been about 1,500 people that have been detained by ICE in the city of Chicago and the surrounding areas. 1,500 people. 60% of them, no criminal record. 60%. Now think about that. Listen, terrific when they get somebody who's a criminal and take them off the streets. Fantastic. But this is not the way law enforcement ought to be allowed to operate. It's not constitutional to just round up the usual suspects, just to stop people because they're black or brown and demand papers. And if they don't have papers, to detain them and in some cases and they're carrying out his orders.
Well, what's being, if I can, Governor,
Yeah.
what's being done specifically to turn the tide or to try and stem the problem that's worsening by the day?
Well, remember, the aggression, right, coming from ICE, that's where it's coming from, not from the protesters. We have limited ability, as you probably know, to take local law enforcement and put them at odds directly with federal law enforcement. However, we do have the ability to make sure that those protesters know what their rights are, that the people in their communities know what their rights are, and we will continue to do everything that we can to protect those rights. Let me also add, there are private organizations of attorneys, and I think you're aware of this, that have taken testimony, have taken video that's been produced often by just regular citizens and protesters, and are using that to file lawsuits on behalf of people who are being imposed upon by the aggression of ICE. That is very helpful to all of us, and that's why you heard me say earlier how important it is for people to be on alert, to narrate videos, to take video of everything that you see, because we can push them back. And that is what happened in New York, and that is what can happen here in Illinois.
Governor, is the memo, this is probably a question for you and the Attorney General, is the memo enough to warrant a lawsuit? Is that, a sort of a next steps kind of situation? And also, I guess, along with that, is there any sort of timeline on when we could see troops in Chicago?
I'll turn it over to the Attorney General to give you the official legal answer. A memo is not enough, but I know that there are actions in waiting and a lawsuit potentially in waiting.
Well, I think the governor got it right. The memo by itself is not enough. However, as the governor laid out, this is the same pattern we saw in Portland, and suffice to say, we are prepared. We've had lawyers working over the weekend in collaboration with the governor's office and others, in communication with the Oregon AG's office. We had previously started our work when the president signaled, and perhaps reference to that is helpful in this. There was previously a signal that they were going to send National Guard in a month or so ago. There was no act that followed. That's why when people ask, is there a preemptive act we could take place, they said, no, there's got to be a better trigger. No Guard was sent in. We weren't prepared then. We are prepared now.
Any sort of timeline, though, on when we could see troops here?
I'm not at the helm of the federal government or the so-called Department of War.
Attorney General, I have a question for you.
You probably have the same question, and I'm going to answer the same way, but go ahead.
So the Adams County Sheriff is still boasting about violence.
I don't do my investigations in the press. Thank you.
But is there any precedent for the ISP now assisting the Broadview Police Department in its investigation of the unprovoked attack on the CBS 2 reporter? Is there any legal precedent for that?
Is there legal precedent for what?
The ICE attack on the CBS 2 reporter, ISP is now investigating. Is there any legal precedent for ISP getting involved here?
I'm not sure what that.
Yeah.
what that
Okay.
is.
Yeah, let me take that. Yes, there is. And local law enforcement and state law enforcement work together all the time on investigations. There is precedent for doing an investigation here. I think the question will be, and it's an appropriate one when the investigation is finished, is what will the federal government do once the investigation is completed and perhaps there's wrongdoing found? Because one of the things that's very disturbing about the way Donald Trump is operating the federal government is he's done away with inspectors general. He's done away with the people who do the internal enforcement of law enforcement at the federal level. And therefore, we might have an absolute open and shut case against an officer in the end. And the federal government can choose not to take action. Now, the CBS reporter can take personal action, and indeed there are attorneys that have been looking to assist people who have been personally affected. And so on behalf of that individual, there could be a lawsuit. It is absolutely precedented for the Illinois State Police to work with local law enforcement doing an investigation of this sort.
Do you have any update on Sheriff Gruden and him violating the State's Trust Act? And
Other than that the Attorney General's office is doing an investigation.
I'll give you a little bit more than I gave you last time.
appreciate it.
We are in touch with Sheriff Gruden, and we're going to be having a conversation. And that's all I'm going to give you.
Mayor Johnson. Shifting gears slightly, if you could, if I could. Chicago Teachers Union put out a tweet over the weekend praising Assata Shakur, despite her controversial background, her conviction for murdering a police officer. Many alders at City Hall calling for you to denounce that. Where do you stand? Do you support that tweet? And do you support CTU and what they said about Assata Shakur?
Can I give you my perspective? All right. Because I don't operate the Chicago Teachers Union's Twitter account. What I can say, though, is that Assata Shakur is an important person in the Black liberation movement who has repeatedly claimed her innocence, and that she was tried by an all-white jury at a particular time in which it was nearly impossible for Black people to receive a fair trial. I don't, and I can't, speak to anyone's claim of innocence. I certainly do not condone any acts of violence. But at a time in which it has become even increasingly clear, and we're dealing with this today, where it is commonplace for Black people to be wrongfully convicted. And so it is incumbent upon us to, recognize that we are still dealing with the sins of our foreparents, of which the city of Chicago is paying hundreds of millions of dollars to respond to individuals who were tortured and forced into false confessions. So as an important part of Black liberation, as an activist, may she rest in peace.
Mayor Thompson.
Governor Pritzker.
What was your...
Do you plan to use CPD to investigate any alleged wrongdoing by ICE in Chicago?
Well, what I've called for is for the federal government to operate an independent investigator to, look into, what I believe is obvious with all of us here today, that there's been, real egregious, horrific acts that have been promulgated against people, right? What I have directed my police department to do through executive order is to protect the fundamental right to peacefully assemble, to ensure that that every single department and agency knows exactly what rights have to be carried out. And what you're seeing today is a strong display of a united front. In fact, if there were ever a time for the people of the world to unite, now is the time.
Mayor Thompson, you've been critical
Sure. This young lady here, please.
If I can piggyback off of Jake's question, more specifically, the ACLU of Illinois and other immigrant rights groups filed a notice in court on Friday talking about the unlawful arrest of 27 people. Some of those U.S. citizens. The group said they've been referred to more than 70 cases of potential violations of ICE making arrests without warrants. So more specifically, is the state or the city looking into that?
Well, look, I can speak candidly here that, the Attorney General and my corporate counsel are in regular conversations around ways in which, we can litigate, these acts. Here's what I believe is most critical here. As an entire state, from the state to the county to the city to our local municipalities, our community organizations, our faith and business community, we are all very clear that what this president is doing has certainly stepped outside of the bounds of the Constitution. You either support the Constitution or you do not. And it is clear that this president has eroded the very fundamental rights of who we are as a democracy, and we're going to use every single tool that's available to ensure that that justice prevails. Thank you.
Mayor Thompson,
I just want to add to that answer, if I may, just for a moment, that there are private organizations. I mentioned earlier that there are attorneys who have stepped up to represent individuals, including offering to represent those 27 that you referenced. And so there is legal action that can be taken and will be taken.
Governor Thompson.
Yes, Olivia.
Thank you. A minute ago, you said that you're still hoping you could deter what seems to be in motion here, but that a lawsuit, there's not a natural lawsuit at this point. What exactly are you hoping to do to deter these troops from coming in? And do you have any other details on where they might go if they would be in Broadview or elsewhere?
We don't know where they will be posted. We don't know that at all. My hope is that the unanimity, the show of a broad swath of the city of Chicago, the state of Illinois, standing against what the federal government is attempting to do here will once again deter them from sending military troops. I have over and over said, if you want to help us fight crime, we work all the time with FBI to fight gangs and DEA to fight drugs and ATF to fight guns. And they need help, the local offices of those federal agencies. And we would like more of them to be available to help us to go after real criminals. And so if you want to help us, that's how you can do it. And I've said that many, many times. Sending military troops who do not know how to do law enforcement, claiming it's about law enforcement. In Oregon, I might add, they're saying, as we think they will do here, right, they would come to protect ICE facilities and ICE personnel. But that is a pretext, again, for bringing troops into the city, for normalizing the militarization of our cities. And we just won't allow that. I mean, we believe that standing up, speaking out, calling on the citizenry to protest, that all of that does have a real positive effect on the question of whether they will ultimately decide to either send them or increase the number after they send some military troops. But all of us should recognize this is a violation of the Constitution. I mean, that is what they're headed for. That is what we are standing up here and decrying. And in the end, they are hurting our state, not helping. They're hurting our state. And again, you've heard it from a swath of people, and there are others who haven't been able to speak, who would, I think, back up everything that each of us has said and have more to say about how this is negatively impacting the people who live in our neighborhoods.
But no further action beyond standing up here at this point?
We're doing everything that we can legally do. We are literally doing everything that we can legally. And if there are other things, if we discover them when they are suggested to us, we'll take those actions too. But it is literally like every action that we can find to do. And that's one of the reasons I talk to other governors. It's one of the reasons I talk to attorneys general beyond our own attorney general. I want to hear what all the options are. I want to know how this is, at least in my lifetime, this is truly unprecedented. And that's why it's difficult for, we're operating in uncharted territory here.
Governor,
When they deliver whether to take legal action and the state resists peacefully, a lot of families are still being separated. Critics believe that the state might have failed to protect those families. What do you answer to those people?
That again, we're operating in uncharted territory, that we believe in following the law in the state of Illinois. Our local, our state law enforcement, our elected officials, we are operating understanding the rule of law matters. And in the end, we have to rely upon the judiciary, and this has always been the case in the United States, that's why you have a judiciary, that to sort of resolve these disputes. And we're working fast and furiously to deal with that. You've seen the Attorney General go after the federal government when they've taken actions against the state of Illinois, and he's winning, I might add.
Is that the message for the families waiting at home?
Listen, the message to everybody across the country and across the state of Illinois is stand up, speak out, protest peacefully, and show your displeasure. And in the end, and this is why everybody needs to pay attention now, you got to show up and vote. Because we're in this situation because there are a lot of people that didn't show up and vote. And I think a lot of people who did show up and vote got lied to, and they regret their votes. And we'll see what happens. If we can have an election a year from November, we'll see that this is why Donald Trump is desperately looking for any way to thwart what he knows is going to be a losing election for Republicans in 2026. Yes, of course.
We've now exceeded 40 lawsuits that we have actually filed, and we've gone in on amicus briefs on other lawsuits. And you may wonder why have you filed a lawsuit in this case, but you're coming in on amicus on another? That's because we lack what's called standing in those other cases. So not every case, particularly of individual rights violations, is one for the state attorney general to come in on. That's why the governor referred to other organizations that represent individuals in those matters. We can come in when the state at large is impacted, and so it does nothing to file a lawsuit where it will be dismissed based upon lack of standing.
Thank you, guys. We'll see you this week.
Thank you.